Hello, everybody. I am Jarrett Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and welcome to another GeneaVlogger live stream. Hope everyone's having a wonderful Friday or wonderful Saturday if you're in the future in Australia and New Zealand. Yeah, hopefully everyone is doing well. Of course, looking a little glitchy here. Always looks a little different. Let's see. Adjust it. Whoa, there we go. Not quite. See if we turn that up a little bit, if that helps a little. See where, no. All right, I think we'll go with that. I don't know, that works. All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Looking like we're starting a little late today, and nothing planned for today. Hopefully we'll have some stuff planned in the near future for special live streams. Have some people I'm talking to about doing live streams, talking to them about research and such. So may have some guests on soon, but let's go through some hellos, then we'll get into some questions, and then we'll just chat and just, typical live stream as usual. I think, I see a lot of my genie, what do I call them? Genie heads? I don't know. A lot of the same people in here. So hello, everybody. It's good to see a lot of you. And then I guess you all are chatting a little bit. Oh, I think you're asking other people, Stig. I was like, wait a second. But hello. Well, good to see you, Brian. I've seen a lot of familiar names and faces. Let's see. Sebastian just got the results for both of my parents' MyHeritage whole genome sequence tests. They had been tested before, and let's just say the admixture changed a bit, and there are fewer DNA matches for both. Interesting on there being fewer DNA matches, but I guess that should be a good sign, because one hope with doing a whole genome sequencing would be that they would have a higher, trying to think of the proper terminology to use here, because technically if I use the wrong term, it could be thrown off by some people. But basically just a higher accuracy. That's kind of what I'm worried about saying, because technically that means certain things. But basically it just, they're doing a lot with imputation and phasing when they're doing DNA results, and whole genome sequencing. We would hope that basically they would have to do no imputation, but they have told us they will be doing imputation because they're doing low pass sequencing. So instead of the typical 30 times of reading the DNA, they're doing 2 passes. So if you hear the whole low pass thing, that's why. So it is good to hear that there are fewer DNA matches in a sense, because that does sound like they've been able to rule out some false positives possibly. At the same time, hopefully that would rule in some false negatives, possibly that, DNA matches that weren't coming up that should be. All right. So yes, let's go through. Listening in while plugging away on building out some trees on Ancestry. Very cool. Hello. Hoodnavins. Genie Regulars sounds pretty good. Maybe I'll go with that. Genie Regulars. Yeah. So, all right, lots and lots of you in here. It does look more accurate. There are lots of low confidence matches before. Okay, yeah. That makes sense. That those would be the ones where a lot of them would go away. Carmigal, a friend is going through chemo and radiation treatments right now, but she wants to do an Ancestry DNA test to see if she can find her bio father. Does her treatments affect the test? I don't honestly know. I don't know how they would necessarily affect the tests, if they would, but I could see that they possibly could. That might be something where you'd want to contact maybe one of the companies that you want her to test at and see if maybe they can answer that for you. The one thing I do know is for people that have gotten bone marrow transplants, their test can actually show up with the DNA of the person who was their bone marrow donor. So the recipients, I think there's actually like terms of service for some of these companies that actually say something about that in there. But for just, someone who's going through chemo and radiation treatments, I don't know. I mean, I know, that can, mess with your DNA, but I don't know in what ways and how. Yeah, I wouldn't know. I should leave it at that. Okay, you're responding to something. Oh, person one, what? I'm here, not very late. Hello, all. Yeah, no, not very late. Just getting started. So, the one mighty pen. Why does Ancestry keep changing the results of the DNA test? So what you're referring to there are the percentages, the admixture percentages. And it's very common that they change them because these percentages are not actually saying that this is how much DNA or this is how much ancestry you have in your DNA. What it's really saying is this is the amount of your DNA that correlates to the present day population of DNA testers that we've defined as that group. And so there's a lot that can be unpacked with that, not even including all of the stuff going on the DNA sequencing and testing and phasing and imputation and all of that stuff. So they're constantly improving how their algorithms work on the DNA side, the phasing, the imputation, all of that. So that can change the results. But then on top of that, then they're doing new studies all the time and redefining the present day population. So that's why it's changing, is because as they get new information, they realize, oh, actually, this group we can define much more specifically based around this DNA now that we have these testers. And so that can change greatly, especially if they do a full, change of how they're defining everything. Then it's going to force a change because no matter what, it's going to be slightly different. But it changes all the time, and that's a good thing because the estimation part is just that, an estimation. Those percentages are not exact, that you can't read those and say, okay, my DNA is, that's all of my ancestry right there is whatever that says. Definitely not the case. It's just an estimation of it, a very blurry idea of your ancestral background, and only within the past 300 to 500 years, kind of more 300 to 400 years, honestly. But basically, yeah. So hopefully that answers that. Jen, I just want MyHeritage to allow users to download the full genome file instead of offering only a 700,000 SNP file, even when the test is whole genome sequencing. Yeah, I hope that too, and I believe that is planned in the future. Well, I guess I shouldn't say it. I don't know if they're going to have the full genome available where you get the entire thing. But I do know, or I shouldn't say I do know, I'm pretty certain that they do have plans to have more or larger files with more data than just the typical 700,000 SNPs. But I don't know the full plan, and I'm guessing that they're going to be doing it in phases, so we may see over time more and more becoming available. I know that I've asked them about the whole Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA aspect of it, and I don't know if I've ever really gotten a seriously direct answer. I think that it's always been very like political sort of, I don't know, stuff that's like, it's like, okay, I didn't want to push it necessarily, but yeah, I don't know. So every once in a while I have some MyHeritage employees lurking in the chat and stuff. So if any of them are in here and can say anything more about it, that'd be great. But yeah, I think that we'll see more being available to us in the future, but how much more, I don't know, So Wigan Lad 2006, my granduncle underwent immunotherapy for lung cancer. He did Ancestry DNA before treatment, sadly failed 23andMe DNA twice, and FTDNA Y-DNA test failed too. Sadly, treatment can affect the DNA tests. Okay, that's kind of what I thought might be the case, and I wasn't 100% sure. But it's interesting to hear from someone who has dealt with it directly, because that's kind of what I was thinking. If there was an effect, that would be the effect, because that's what it's doing to you. Radiation and chemotherapy is basically it's damaging a lot of your cells and your DNA. So yeah, thank you for that. Hello. It will. They said later this year you'd be able to download the whole genome sequence file. Okay, good to hear someone else. Yeah, I need to go through and see a lot of those announcements too, because with every different announcement they do, there's kind of like they say some stuff in one announcement, not in other announcements. So sometimes it's hard to remember like what they said exactly. But even with that said, I don't know if that whole genome sequence file is Y-DNA and mitochondrial and all of that, or if it's just the autosomes. I don't know. Goedenavond, vanuit Utrecht. I was going to say vanuit, but yeah. Waar het Amsterdam staat up the map? Up the map? No, up the cart? I don't know. Where's the Amsterdam map? Oh, I changed. Yeah, I changed the maps. So this is actually Odessa. So I haven't been changing the maps that much. I changed it to Amsterdam for a second. Now it's Odessa, and then I'll jump around. So yeah. Let's see. I got Shakadisham. Hi Jarrett. Say where can I find Jewish records from the Bukovina? I'm guessing you're saying, but maybe you're meeting Buvovina region in Romania. I asked the local archive and they don't have those records. Yeah, so the main place that you would go, especially if you're doing Jewish family research in that area, is JewishGen. Unfortunately, right now, oh wait, no, okay. Yeah, I went to go log in and it was telling me that they were under maintenance, but now I can log in. So just give me un momento. All right, there we go. Search all records. So we're going to share that screen. All right, so this is JewishGen, jewishgen.org. And I prefer to search in the all databases. Jack, hey, Jack, chill out. Jack. Oh, my dog. He's in that case. Jackie boy, chill out with that. I feel like it's getting more common. My dogs are usually really good while I stream, but I don't know. Lately, my doggy boy Jack, he's just a crazy little dog. So they have a lot of records for Bukovina, not a ton. Of course, you also want to consider outside of Bukovina. So just to start, we're going to go to Town Finder. So Bukovina, we're not looking at a town, we're looking at a region. Yeah, I guess they don't have it. But yeah, all right, we'll look at Chernivtsi. That's in Bukovina. So, but depending on where the town is, which is honestly going to actually be important in trying to figure things out, because Bukovina is a large area. But you can have a lot of information available. So here's all the towns in Bukovina that are on JewishGen. There's 67 of them. So you want to try to figure out which one your family's coming from. That'll be a big piece. Let's see if you said anything. Nope. Okay. But when you do the search, one thing that you can do, there's a town search, which, if you figure out which town it's from specifically, that's great. But you can also do any field. Oh my gosh, Jack, chill out, dude. Hey, Jackie boy. He's crazy. I don't know if you all can hear him, but if you can, emojis in the chat. Jack. Petey's just giving me the side eye, like, I'm trying to nap here. What are you doing? So here's where there's 22,626 records that mention Bukovina. And let's just go down to the Romania. So not a lot there necessarily, but let's look at some marriages and divorces. And so, you need to know names and all that, but this is where a lot of those records related to Jewish families are. And then sometimes, there's more information. So if you needed to, get this record, that's where you get it. Sometimes records that are on Jewish Gen are connected to records that were digitized by Family Search. Basically, Family Search has digitized a ton of records, but it hasn't necessarily indexed them. And then Jewish Gen has teams of people that are in what are known as research divisions. Let's see if I can find a research division thing about our team. They need to update, I think. Let's see. Do they have the research divisions? All right, we can probably look by county. So they have it all broken up into different groups. So like Germany, Canada. So there's usually different research divisions for each one. And so different groups are doing different digitization efforts. So there is a Jewish Gen Romania Moldova database. There's also a Bessarabia database, which is kind of covering a lot of the same locations. Oh, maybe not. Maybe did they merge? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. All right. So, but like here, we've got Bukovina updated. So this is region. Well, let me look at the actual. Okay. I want to actually show what's there. This is actually a really annoying feature. What in the hell? All right, I don't like that at all. But yeah, so there's a lot available on Jewish Gen is basically what it comes down to. But there's still a lot that could be there that isn't. So you still may have trouble finding what you're looking for. But yeah. Andy Palencia, is 50% Indigenous American a lot? I recently did mine with Ancestry DNA and got that amount. Yeah, 50% Indigenous American would be the equivalent of your parent being a full Indigenous American. The other option being that both of your parents are about 50% Indigenous American as well. So yeah, that's extremely significant. If that was not something that you expected, then, there might be an NPE, a not parent expected. And if that is the case, then you would see that in your DNA matches. Basically, cousins that should be coming up and close matches that should be showing up aren't showing up. And instead, there's other people that are very close matches that you do not know. And by very close matches, I would mean people that are usually 400 centimorgans or higher about. But, might not be an NPE if, let's say you come from a Mexican ancestry or a Brazilian ancestry, or just using your photo, a Colombian ancestry, then basically, it would make sense that you would get 50% Indigenous American because that's a large portion of that population group. But if instead it's more of like you thought mom and dad were both from, Europe and, Ireland and England or something like that, then something else is going on. So the other thing is, getting your parents to test. So yeah, hopefully that answers that. Hopefully that's not a crazy, like, hopefully it's something manageable. Okay. Zachary Navarro, I'm having trouble downloading my data off Ancestry to other sites. Is it normal for it to come out as a zip file? Yeah, it is. I don't remember how each site does it. Some of them, it comes out as a zip file that when you open up, it's then usually a CSV file or a text file. sometimes both. Sometimes there's like more advanced versions of CSV files that I always forget the names of, that sometimes it is. And then sometimes when you download it from sites, it's just straight up the CSV file or a text file. But a zip file is totally normal. And I'm even pretty sure that like if you try to upload a zip file to GEDmatch and maybe Family Tree DNA, I can't remember for sure, that you can just upload that and that'll work to transfer the DNA. But I'm not 100% sure. You might have to open up the zip and pull out the CSV or text. Julia Shenko, do Ancestry, 23andMe, etc. accept profiles created from artifact DNA testing, or is it spit in a tube only? So it is spit in a tube only for Ancestry, 23andMe, and MyHeritage is a swab, but you have to take the DNA test with them to be able to get into their database. Family Tree DNA, Living DNA, and GEDmatch all allow uploads, or what sometimes are called transfers. So if you do artifact DNA testing, which for those who don't know, artifact DNA testing is where you take an artifact like glasses or dentures or something from an ancestor. A lot of times it'll be the stamp on an envelope. And if you take that and you get the DNA from it, you can then upload that DNA, put that onto different databases. And so the company that does this is a company called Genetic Legacies. They're based out of Salt Lake City. I know the people that run the company. They're very knowledgeable. I spoke to them at RootsTech, and they were telling me that they basically have, I think it was an 83% success rate. It is expensive. It is not cheap. And you may have to go through different steps multiple times, because when it comes to doing artifact testing, there's a lot of issues that can come up. And the first phase is you've got to extract the DNA. So first, that phase is technically a couple of pieces in there, but first they have to extract it. And if they are able to extract enough DNA, then they can evaluate it to make sure that that it has enough to then sequence for phase 2. And they do this because they don't want you to spend a whole bunch of money for phase 2 when it might not even get to that spot. So that's why they have it broken up into phases. But once you get past phase 1, then phase 2 has the same issue where they may try it the first time, they have an issue, then they've got to do it again. So this is expensive, and you never know how many tries it might take you. But if you do it, then I know that they put the DNA profile on the GEDmatch. Let me actually make this bigger. I just realized it might not be big enough. Fine, I'll accept your cookies. Ridiculous. So they put it on GEDmatch. I don't know if you can upload it to other databases. I would imagine that there'd be a way to do it, even if like you have to download it from GEDmatch, which I can't remember if you can do that or not. But yeah, so Ancestry, 23andMe, MyHeritage are not available for uploading to, but MyHeritage has already talked about the fact that they plan to get into the artifact testing game. They made a big announcement 2 years ago about working on it. Then they made a big announcement this year at RootsTech talking about the fact that they are going, or that they've given they've given 5 samples that they've tried and were successful with. And one of those was for Arnold Schoenberg, the famous composer. He's also the grandfather of E. Randall Schoenberg, who is a genie curator and it was a YouTube video. That's why they didn't do a blog post. All right, I'll just talk about it. Because they don't have a page on it yet on MyHeritage. But basically, Randy's also a famous lawyer because he helped sue the Austrian government, I think it was, to get back a group of art or a group of paintings that basically belonged to a Jewish family that had been looted by the Nazis, and then an Austrian museum had taken them and wasn't giving them back. And there's a whole movie that was made about this called Women in Gold. If you've seen it, Randy was portrayed by Ryan Reynolds. So very, very famous guy, and basically his grandfather, very, very famous composer. And they took a stamp from an envelope from his grandfather, sequenced it, and were able to get a profile where it matched right up to Randy, who's tested along with, I think, his dad's tested, and he's had a bunch of people in his family test. Actually, maybe I can pull up the video and just here we go. Hopefully this doesn't slow things down terribly, but of course it is. Of course it is. Is that a bunch of this other stuff? Then it's funny. I'm streaming on YouTube, but as soon as I start to try to play a video from YouTube, all of a sudden it's just like can't handle it. All right. It's further down. Okay, there we go. So that's what I was looking for. So yeah, so they got this letter. They were able to sequence the DNA from it, and now they have Randy's grandfather's DNA. And artifact testing is really great for genetic genealogy because the older generations that we're able to do DNA testing for, the more we can tell from that DNA from that side. Because, you're only 25% of your grandparents' DNA. So there's a whole 75% of their DNA that you're not able to compare other DNA matches to. And so you can get a better idea of how you're related to a lot of other people. And I've been able to benefit from this because I had my grandmother test, and I've been able to figure out so much stuff that when I look at, how those same DNA matches are matching my parents and myself and my cousins and all that, it's like there's no way we would have caught on to what we caught on to had she not tested. And so, she's the only one of my 4 grandparents that have done DNA testing, because all of the others passed away before that was available. In fact, actually, my grandfathers all passed away before I was born. I didn't have any grandfathers growing up. 2 grandmothers and 2 great-grandmothers. But if I were to get DNA from, any of them, especially my great-grandparents, oh my gosh, there's so much that could be figured out. And even more, as people get more artifact testing done, and you're not just then comparing, the older generations, great-grandparents to, your present-day generations. You're comparing your great-grandparents to your cousin's great-grandparents. That's when really big discoveries are really going to start being able to show up. Because we're going to be able to catch on to a lot closer relationships that you just wouldn't be able to figure out further. And then there's so much more that you can add on to that with reconstructed genomes and recursive reconstructed genomes. And yeah. So, all right. Yeah, you got me off there on a tangent, Julia. So, I think I'm going to try to scroll forward. I should mention, if you do have questions, definitely put them in the chat. I can't guarantee. Do I have that right there? Yeah. I can't guarantee that I'll be able to answer all the questions, especially when I get on a tangent or if chat goes fast. But if you do a super sticker, like it says above me, I guarantee I will answer those. For one, because you're helping support the channel, and I greatly appreciate that. And so it's kind of a little bit of a benefit for doing that. But also, it makes it really easy to be able to see that come up and be able to go to that very quickly and easily. So for, others, if, you don't have the ability to do it, you can keep posting in chat. if I skip it at some point. But yeah. All right, let's get to it. How far? Oh, nobody. Hey, what is your email? We can send a request for your services. So my email is GeneaVlogger@gmail.com. So you can email me there. I have a website that should hopefully be coming up very soon. That'll be GeneaVlogger.com. And once that's up, then people will be able to book me for consultations through there. And this is a great place to mention that I am available for consultations if you'd like to have me do a Zoom call with you for 30 minutes or an hour and go through your DNA results or your family tree, your research, or whatever that you might have a question about, or that you want a second pair of eyes, or you're just not quite sure what the next steps might be. Then I will do a consultation and we, help you figure that out, go through the research with you and figure it out. So yeah, thank you very much for asking that. That's great. Let's see. Jero Jen, what do you think about the exhumation of ancestors for genetic, not forensic genealogy? I want to test two of my great-great-grandmothers, but I haven't really thought much about the morality behind it. Yeah, I don't know. This is something that I've always kind of wondered as well. Because, for one, I think a lot of genetic genealogists have thought like, what would the deal be with that? Is it really that bad or is it not? And I guess, that's going to also vary greatly by person and by, religious beliefs and things like that. Because I know there's a lot of religious beliefs that are basically, once someone's buried, you leave them alone. I know there's a lot of other people that are much more like, once it gets to a certain point, and the people that knew them have all passed, then it's kind of a different story. And, it's going to vary person to person. There's some cultures out there that have, their ancestors literally sitting on a cliff and they go and like hang out with them, once or twice a year. Granted, that's like, Papua New Guinea, or I can't remember where that is, but I think that's where it is, something like that. But yeah, so I don't know, it's something that, I've always been curious about. One thing that I've always wondered is, when someone's passed away and obviously their body is decomposing, you'd think that somehow there'd be some connection to the soil. And, it'd be amazing if somehow in the future someone figured out a way where you could actually get DNA out of the soil of someone who's already deceased and buried. Granted, I have no idea, how people would feel about that ethically or morally or whatever, but at least then you're not dealing with an exhumation necessarily. But yeah, I don't know. It's something that is done a lot for forensics. And yeah, I guess I think it would really depend on the family and their beliefs with it, so basically if you could get the entire family to sign off on it and be like, yeah, that's fine, then I guess that would be okay. Maybe. I don't know. So, big question mark. Susan McClendon, I recently found out that I have a small percentage of Yemenite Jewish ethnicity. I know you've probably tested it, family tree DNA or MyHeritage. And I have pathogenic markers for Tay Sachs. No one ever has told me about our family being of Jewish descent. However, there were stories of French Huguenot. Could that have been a cover for being Jewish for those ancestors? I guess it could have been a cover. I don't know enough about French Huguenot history to tell whether or not that, that was a common thing. I do know that there are a lot of areas where Jews and French Huguenots were living near each other, or often they would, one would take over an area that the other used to live in. So like, I think in East End of London, I think there were a lot of areas that had a lot of French Huguenots and then Jews moved in, or maybe it was the other way around. But Yeah, so I don't know. It's certainly possible. Gedmatch was having trouble with the zip file. Okay, yeah, if they were having trouble with the zip file, then I would say, unzip it and, try to upload the CSV or text. Yeah. Oh wait, I meant to hit this, but I'll go to Sebastian's next. MyHeritage will be allowing artifact DNA testing in the future. Not sure at what price point or when, but it was mentioned in RootSec 2025 in this year's. Okay. Oh yeah, I guess. Oh wow, this is 427. Oh wow, yeah. I was talking about that a minute ago. Okay. Sebastian, Jero, I had the same question. I contacted a company in Australia. They said I could get the remains tested in the US, but the legal aspect is not as simple in Argentina, plus the ethics. Yeah, I think because I know when I made a video about this, I talked about actually what it would take to do an exhumation. And basically what it does say, you have to get all of the living descendants on board. If one of them dissents, then you can't do it. You also have to get the cemetery on board, and it has to be, I think, approved by a judge, or there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through to be able to do it. And then on top of that, it's crazy expensive, tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, just for the actual exhumation part. Not even the costs of maybe lawyers or whatever you might need to hire to be able to do what you need to do. Would not be easy. Oh yeah, Elamar Pong, the video from Glad's talk at Roots Tech. I definitely want to hear Randall's side of that story. So actually, Randy posted on Facebook. Yeah, he posted on Facebook about it, basically thanking them. Let me see. Is that a public post? Yeah, it's a public post. Can I show it? No, I'm not going to show it. Too much that I can't show on here. But yeah, so Randy posted about it publicly and said, I wonder if I can look at it. Oh, no. Yeah, because they don't let you look at it where it's just the full page. All right. But yeah, if you Google MyHeritage, Randy Schoenberg or Randall or whatever, I think it comes up. Irene, a little late, but always good to see you from Polini, North Carolina. Polini. Packerbagger 23, PSA, do fan club research, especially for immigrants. I just broke through a 15-year-old brick wall by finally considering the fan method. Oh yeah, fan method for sure. Something I've been talking about for years. Often there's two ways people refer to it: friends, associates, and neighbors. Others will say family, associates, and neighbors. I prefer to kind of think family, associates, and neighbors, partially because when I think of the fan method, the first step to that is, you're trying to figure out about your great grandfather and you can't figure stuff out. Well, then look at the people around him, and the first people would be his family. Do you know about any siblings? They're, his kids, and then all, looking into all of them, and then, his wife and all, and then friends and then associates, people that you find as witnesses, or people that you find on other records, and a lot of people will see lodgers in a family's household, or a maid or someone like that in a household, and not look into them. And you really should, because you never know what that might lead you to, even if it's finding descendants of that person. Sometimes they know stories about your family, or maybe even have photographs, or just some sort of information on your family. So yeah, fan method for sure. For sure. Gazillion, late to the stream. Yeah, late to the stream, but not too late. I can't go crazy long today because I do have stuff planned. It is today. Yeah, okay. So yeah, but good to see you. Good to see you. And Maven, been a while, but since I caught one of these streams, yeah. But you're here. You're here. Jero Jen, I understand that autosomal DNA can be obtained from the temporal bone even after 100 years. Well, I mean, I can tell you that, they're able to get DNA, autosomal DNA, I'm pretty sure, from, bones that are older than that. Granted, I don't know specific, ones, because I know different bones in different parts of the body hold DNA much better than others. Teeth being one of the, top ones to hold DNA. But yeah, it's amazing how old of DNA can be sequenced these days. Yeah, I'm glad to help Suzanne. Maven, at my last local library genealogy group, a new person showed up, and I ended up finding her sperm donor father and everything about him within an hour. Oh, okay, interesting. So for a lot of donor conceived, as my understanding is that usually what they prefer. If there's multiple children of specific donors, then they will often have like groups set up already. So like I wouldn't be, I actually, I guess you can say as much as you want, but like I know in a lot of cases they have like almost pre-made messages where like as soon as you show up, you don't even have to do anything. Like your DNA results pop up, they see the notification, and then they send out like a standard like message of like, hello, you have done a DNA test and you're matching us, and this shows us that you are another child of donor whoever, and here's the details about that. And if this was a surprise to it's like, I forgot exactly how they all do it. They all slightly do it differently. There are some groups, like I know there's a group for the various doctors that were sperm donor doctors, and like invert did the IVF and all of that, and they use their own sperm, and then like it turns out that there's like hundreds of children from them because of this. And I think there was even like a Netflix documentary about one of these, and they had it where it's basically like every time some new sibling popped up. So yeah, very, very interesting. Maven, it wasn't too difficult because she had over 40 siblings confirmed, most of which were tested DNA half sibling matches. They knew his last name already, but nothing else. Okay. Yeah. So, and then Ottawa, it's very expensive, and you need to make sure there's something still to dig up, depending on the length. Oh, okay. You're talking about the exhumation. Yeah, true. Yeah, depending on the length and if they're cremated, there might be nothing. Yeah, that's the other thing is you might go through the exhumation process and then get nothing out of it. Gazillion, very excited. This month I had my very first genealogy commission. Congratulations. Good to hear. And then PL Jones, Patrick, there's a wild Netflix documentary called Our Father. Okay, I think that's what I was talking about on this case you were mentioning in Indianapolis. Yeah. Suzanne, I won't be too surprised if I end up with 40 half siblings too. My bio father was an 18-year-old sailor. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, a sailor, then you could also be expecting people from all around the world, which in that case, I would actually suggest if you have not tested on My Heritage, highly suggest testing on My Heritage, because My Heritage has the largest contingency of non-English speaking testers in their database. So Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA, Living DNA, most of the people that test with them are usually in the US, Canada, England, Ireland, Scotland, British Isles, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and then maybe a little bit of Europe otherwise as well too. But with My Heritage, they have a lot more outside of that. They have a ton in South America, a ton in Eastern Europe. Oh, I already see. Yeah, I've tested. Yeah, and that's what you should do. Test everywhere, in my opinion. Especially, if you're trying to do this for genetic genealogy, you want to get as many DNA matches as possible. And to do that, you need to test everywhere, cast as wide a net as possible. So, yeah. Venvike, do you know if Ashkenazi Jewish users get more or fewer matches with the new MyHeritage full genome DNA test? I don't know for sure. I haven't seen enough data across the board to tell whether or not. I've seen a few people talk about their differences of matches. Lewis Kessler's blog being the most significant in terms of actually talking about this and showing like the data in depth. So like here, he's got less. But from what I hear from most people, it's less overall. I know someone mentioned it earlier that they had less. And that's kind of a good sign, because what it means is that they're being able to rule out a lot of the matches that are basically false positives. So matches that look like DNA matches, but really aren't, because of all that needs to go into doing this DNA testing. So like one of the big things that is a big issue with testing that should hopefully be overcome with whole genome sequencing is what's known as imputation. So let's see if I can find something on imputation connected to genetic genealogy. I do not want to use that. Oh, sweet. Alberta Estes has a thing. Oh, no good visuals there. Okay, well, basically, imputation is where, when they're testing your DNA, they are not testing all of your DNA. They are only testing a small percentage of it. So you have over 3.2, 3.3 billion pairs of DNA, or billions of markers. And when you do a DNA test, it's usually only looking at about 700,000. So 700,000 versus 3.3 billion, that's a major difference. Well, it's not 700,000 in one like chunk. It's like they're doing, one DNA marker here, and then they go a couple of thousand, and then another DNA marker, and then they go a couple of thousand, and another DNA marker. So there's thousands of spots between all these DNA markers that they're testing. So what they then do to try to fill in some of that gap is they do what's known as imputation. And so when they look at your specific DNA markers that they're testing, which they call SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. In other words, there's single nucleotides, spots on your DNA, that there's a polymorphism, an expectation of a variation. So in layman's terms, it's a spot on your DNA where we're expecting possible differences from the reference DNA that we all connect to, basically. And so when that difference is there, that's an indication of relationships and things like that. So when they get a series of those, even though they're very separated, they can try to figure out what's in between, and that's what's known as imputation. One of the ways a lot of people explain imputation is it's almost like playing what is it, Wheel of Fortune, where you have like the letters and all of that. Yeah, it's Wheel of Fortune. So it's almost like playing a Wheel of Fortune game, where it's like, you've got, a letter here, and then a letter here, and a letter here, and based on just that little information, you've got to fill it all in. And that's where you get a lot of these issues, especially in terms of false positives and things like that. There's more to it than just imputation, but with whole genome sequencing, that's one of the things that we would hope would be much less of an issue, because now instead of doing the 700,000, we're doing the whole genome, all 3.3 billion. But MyHeritage is not doing it at the same strength that you usually do whole genome sequencing. So whole genome sequencing, the way that it works, the way that they do it, is what's known as short read sequencing. And I actually don't know if this is something I've gone that in depth into on here. There's a lot of great visualizations on this stuff. Here's one. So this is short read sequencing. And basically there's long reads, but we're talking more short read sequencing. And basically, what they're doing is they're cutting the DNA up into all these pieces, and then they're doing reads of those strings, those short cuts. And then after they've read all of them, they stack them over each other, and they're able to go through and read the DNA. And because there's errors in trying to sequence the DNA, because they have all of these different reads, they can then get an idea of, okay, well, this sequence, we out of the 30 reads we did, this sequence, it showed up 25 times as A and only 2 times as T. So we're very confident that this is an A reading at this spot, as opposed to maybe an AT or an A or a TT or, whatever. So, here they're thinking, okay, AA maybe or whatever. But the thing is that if you do only two passes, then that means that if there is a difference at those spots, then you're going to run into issues. And so that's why if you read what MyHeritage is doing, they're still using imputation with this new whole genome sequencing, because basically they're going and reading everything, but then I guess they're going back and doing imputation to clean up the errors. Let me see if I can find them saying something. Talking about how the sequencing works. Okay, so they have a blog talking about it, but they don't have any good visuals. That's what I need. I need good visuals. But they do actually. Do they say who they use? Because they use Illumina, I'm pretty sure. Who are they using? Ultima Genomics, Gene by Gene. Hey, come on, what's the system? Yeah, I don't know. All right, but either way, hopefully that gets the point across, is that with the way that they're doing it, it's not quite the way that you typically have it done. I'm going to see if I can actually find a different visual. All right, let's close this then. Let's close that. All right. Let's see. Short read sequencing. Yeah. I think I've gone over it. I'm like looking through all these different images of short read sequencing stuff, and kind of gets the point across. So short reads, DNA fragments, yeah. So some of the different kinds of that's not showing up. So yeah. All right, we'll leave it at that. But that's why with the whole genome sequencing, getting less matches because less errors in sequencing and figuring out the DNA and all that, hopefully. But yeah. All right. Let's see. Solid Boss 1738. I have a DNA match who doesn't know their father, but it says in terms of being related to me that they are first cousin, once removed, or half grand uncle. All right. So when it comes to the relationship estimation that they're giving you, the first cousin, once removed, or half grand uncle, take that with a grain of salt, because what you really have is a lot more possibilities of how you're related. So what I suggest you go to is the Shared Centimorgan project on DNA Painter. This is free to use. You don't even have to create a profile to use it, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to put that in the chat for you there, Solid Boss. And you put in how much DNA that you share. So if you're getting a first cousin once removed or half grand uncle, whatever, then I'm guessing you're getting right around 400 or so centimorgans. So let's put that in there. And so you can see that there's a lot more possibilities. So when you look at a square, you have the relationship. So make that bigger. So here we have first cousin once removed. Below that, that's the average. Or I always say this. I can't remember if it's average or mean, but about the same thing. Of all of the DNA matches that they have for this. And at this point, I should mention this chart is based on thousands of proven relationships of people that have done DNA testing. And so using all of that data, the average amount is 433 centimorgans, but the range goes from 102 centimorgans to 980 centimorgans. So you can see that it is, so I guess it's the mean, not the average. So you can see that it is well within the large majority of the cases. But you can see that a first cousin, it's within the realm of possibility, kind of unlikely, but it's still a possibility. But a second cousin, it's still that's a strong possibility too. So there's a lot more you have to take into account with it. Some of these sites, when they give you that estimation of, first cousin once removed and half grand uncle or whatever, if you click on it, it'll give you a little bit more details. Or sometimes if you put in your age and your DNA match is also put in your age, it will then use that information to give you a better estimation. Because, if you, let's say that you were born in 1990 and your DNA match was born in 1950. Well, that's going to indicate that your DNA match is probably one generation or possibly even two generations older than you. They could be the same generation as you, but being that, they're 40 years older, then they're going to take that into account and say, okay, there's a higher likelihood that they're not in the same generation and that the older one is in an older generation than the younger. Now, as we all know, or as many of us know, that may not always be the case. I actually have second cousins of mine who are the same age as my dad. And that's just because my grandfather was one of the younger ones of his siblings. He had children when he was much older. Then my parents had me when they were a little bit older than most people. They were, I think, in their mid-30s. I guess not. Still, basically, it made it so that some of my other cousins, where they came from the older siblings of my grandfather, and they had children when they were much younger. And so it was like, now these second cousins are, 30 plus years older than me. But it's something that can be taken into account when you're going through this and figuring it out. So hopefully that helps. Let's continue. Oh, wow. Yeah. All right. Let's see. What time am I supposed to be at that? All right, cool. All right. Jen, I was always told I look like my paternal family. DNA showed that I share more DNA, 28%, with my maternal grandmother. Phenotype not always predicts genotype. Yeah, that's for sure. So, hello, ironically. Good to see you. Auntie, are Hungarians Asians? I think I don't know. That's a really hard answer, or a hard question to answer, because there's so much to it. It's, when it comes to Hungarians, I'm sure there's a mixture of different populations within Hungarian. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are some Asian connections in their ancestry, just because Hungary being in Eastern Europe, and there is some connection with Asia, but I wouldn't know if that's common or not. And then Solid Boss, 521 centimorgans, it says. So yeah, so that's even on the higher end. So 521. So these are your possibilities. Pretty much the same stuff. I doubt it's your great grandparent. That'd be crazy. That'd be wild. But yeah, lots of possibilities here. PMUS 11, which genealogy service is best for Eastern European / Slavic people? I would probably say MyHeritage at this point. MyHeritage has they created they created distribution centers for their DNA tests years ago so that they could be distributed all across the world. And one of the places they focused on was Eastern Europe. And so I know that that's what most Eastern Europeans, that's who they test with. A ton of the Ukrainian genealogists that I collaborate with and have worked with, that is their go-to, is MyHeritage. And that's who they suggest everybody test with. So especially if you are looking for present day matches that live in areas of Eastern Europe, that's most likely where you're going to get it. So yeah. Hassan Radi, are Arabs and Jews related? Yeah, I mean, very distantly we know for sure through Y-DNA. It shows very conclusively that when you look at the majority of the known Jewish Y-DNA lineages, they very strongly connect right back into Middle Eastern lands and Arabic lands. And you can actually kind of see as you go further back in time with the Y-DNA tree, the phylogenetic tree, you start to notice as more Middle Eastern and Arabic and North African population groups start to show up. And through that, they can then deduce, well, when were the different split offs? And so it's very interesting because you can see, like, let's see if I can pull up mine. So for my Y-DNA lineage, funny enough, I'm actually kind of thinking I'm going to do a video on this. So yeah, you all might be getting a preview. But so this is my Y-DNA profile here. I'm JFT 101167. And, all of the, or multiple of these people that I've connected with have said that they come from Jewish families. So we know that this is Jewish branch. And basically for all of us, our SNPs that form to, that we all are defined by, form sometimes about 1,650 years before present, but we all likely have a shared most recent common ancestor who lived about 850 years ago. So sometime in the 1100s. So then we go back a generation, and actually I'm going to do this chart-wise because you can see it as a family tree. So here I am in the family tree, you can see. So this is phylogenetic tree. This is just the Y-DNA mutation. So there was a man here who there were 2 mutations that happened in him, and that defines all of his descendants. So all of us that have these 2 SNPs, FT998887 and SK746, which is why it's named that, we all come from this guy. He lived about 1,650 years ago. But then he had 2 branches off of him. One that had these 9 specific SNPs form, and then the one that I descend from that had these 7. So for these branches, we can see that they also are Jewish families. So, but we're only 1,650 years back. So then as we get back further, now we're back, our most recent common ancestor living about 1,600 years ago, but some of these SNPs forming 5,000 years ago. But here we can see that we actually have someone who's of Libyan and who's Libyan, but also Jewish. So they have Judeo-Arabic listed there. And then we also have someone who's Judeo-Italian. So from that, we can deduce here we have Eastern European branches that formed about 1,700 years ago or so. And then there's a sibling branch of theirs, which is more in the Mediterranean, Libya, North Africa, and Italy. And so you can deduce, okay, it's very likely that about 1,700 years ago or so, which would be, fall of, Jews leaving, because of being pushed out of by the Romans. And so they're going to, England and Libya over here, but over here they went to Eastern Europe. And we go back another generation. And so now we're looking at a family branch that our shared ancestor for everyone was about 5,300 years ago, which, funny enough, what's the Hebrew year? The Hebrew year is 5,786. So 5,786 years ago, in a sense, that's kind of, or it aligns with what we have for, the Hebrew year, which is interesting. And then we look, well, who are these? It's two people from Qatar. So we have here one branch where everybody's Jewish, and all of them have a most recent common ancestor that mostly lived about 1,700 years ago, but their DNA was forming over these SNPs were forming over 5,000 years ago. But then we have this other branch that about 5,000 years ago, well, now all of their descendants are in Qatar. Then we go back another branch. And now we're back a couple of thousand years more, 7,000 years. And here we get some interesting stuff. We get Saudi Arabia and Georgia. So Georgia, we're in the Caucasus Mountains right there, not quite the Middle East or Arabic, but Saudi Arabia right there. And so it's a very distant relation, but it is there. And we see this with tons of these different Y-DNA lineages. Here we get one that's interesting. We get India. So that's about, 8,000 years ago before present for our most recent common ancestor. And then we go back again, and now we have this whole other lineage that 10,000 years ago, one line had descendants going to India, Saudi Arabia, Georgia, Qatar, Libya, Italy, and Eastern Europe. And then you have this line here that we have Iraq, and we have China, and we have Tajikistan, and China again, interestingly enough, and then more China. And so this is a branch where there's connections to both the Caucasus and the Middle East, but as well as getting into China. Then you go back another generation, and now here we're getting Libya and Arabic. So not Judeo-Arabic, they're Arabic. They're Arab. We go back another. And so now, we're looking at a family tree where the most recent common ancestor of all of us is about 13,000 years ago. And here we've got a whole new branch where it's got this is our branch that we've been looking at. But then we have all these descendant branches over here that we get Italy, Armenia, Yemen, Armenia, Syria, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Italy, UK, Armenia, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Palestine. And then we go down here and we get a ton of Palestine. And so, we can see with the Y-DNA that there is a connection. The other thing that we can see this with is with PCA plotting maps. And when they did this study on the Erfurt Jews from the 1400s, they were able to find that there was, is it coming up? Whatever. Basically, they were able to find that there was one part of the population that had a very high leaning towards more Middle Eastern ancestry, and another part of the population that had a bit more on the European side. And it's very interesting because it matches up with what we do know about Jewish history, and especially with what we can see in the DNA, in that while there is a large majority of Jewish DNA that is Middle Eastern, for the Ashkenazi Jews, there is still a good chunk. And I always forget the exact percentage. I want to say it's somewhere between 20% and 30% maybe, or 40%. But I feel like 40% it was way higher than what I remember. But basically that there is European. And what we find is that Y-DNA lineage often shows Middle Eastern, but then mitochondrial DNA lineage, which shows the maternal lines, will often show European. And so like for me, my mitochondrial group is H1AI1. And one of my top mitochondrial DNA matches, who's only one genetic distance away from me, is famous genealogist Megan Smoleniak, who has no Jewish ancestry as far as I know. So I'm going to see if I can pull up. Yeah, so here's the mitochondrial DNA tree. So H1AI1, and that comes from H1AI. And so what we find when we look at a lot of the descendants of this, and there's really very few mitochondrial people in Weifel, but basically we see that it's a lot of people that are Jewish, but then also a lot of European. And so it suggests that, thousands of years ago, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, something like that, there was some European woman who married a Jewish guy, and then all of her descendants were then Jewish. And so we find that, there is a specific part of that H1AI1, which actually, I wonder if I can show. And I probably can't go too much longer here. Let's close this. All right, so we have H1AI1. And so we can see, let's see the table view. So you can see the number of testers, the descendants of H1AI1, and where they're located. And so for the ones that are Lithuania, Hungary, Poland, Belarus, the vast majority I have found that are H1AI1 descendants that are from the Eastern European countries, and that also includes Russian Federation and Ukraine. They're all coming from Jewish ancestry. But then the Denmark, Wales, England, Germany, Ireland, UK, Scotland, Sweden, US is a big mix, obviously, and same with unknown origins. But all those other ones, they're the ones that have no Jewish ancestry. So, not sure when, but at some point, some European woman who, if I went up my maternal line, my mother's 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 mother, thousands of years back, I would eventually find a European woman who married, had maybe not even married, who knows what the story is, but basically she had children who then were Jewish, or their descendants became, were Jewish. And so there's a whole massive amount of us that are Jewish. So it's, it's not like a recent, just 200 years ago. I mean, we're talking, thousands of years ago. And we don't know the story. Because, if it's 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, I mean, we could be talking, this might have been some Roman woman who then, had children with some Jewish guy, and then her descendants were Jewish. And then when all the Jews were kicked out, then that family was included. So yeah, it's amazing how with mitochondrial DNA and Y-DNA, you can see the singular stories of your ancestors in their path, because using how we are all related, know the people with known ancestry plus the archaeological data, that's what allows us to really figure out where everybody connects in. So yeah. All right. Let's see. I've been rambling on. Oh, I saw this. Sprungle. What is the most unexpected origin of one of your ancestors? Honestly, it's kind of hard to say. I would say that one of the most unexpected was the North African. I know that with Sephardi ancestry that, we spread all around. But when I started researching my family from Amsterdam, I wasn't quite sure, what to expect. I knew that, my Nunes Vaz line had gone from Livorno to Amsterdam. So I suspected that I had other lines that had been elsewhere before Amsterdam, but after they had left, Spain and Portugal. And so when I found my Espinosa line had come from Zale, Morocco, that was quite intriguing. And funny enough, a distant cousin of mine, John Berman on CNN, or I actually don't know if he's on CNN anymore, but he did a whole thing with them. Yeah, it was called CNN's Roots. And so they went through certain ancestries of different, anchors or whatever. And so John Berman was one of the people that they did. And they went through our shared Espinoza line, which traces to Zale. So these images from this website, these are all of the Esnoga Cemetery. That's a statue of Baruch Spinoza, obviously. That looks like that's Beth Chaim. I'm pretty sure that's Beth Chaim's entrance. Him eating a stroopwafel, taking a whatever. So they go through that in that video, but he ends up in Zali. So that was very unexpected. And then there's been a few times of unexpected origins where it wasn't really that, like, the area they came from was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they actually came from that area, as much as it was, oh my gosh, I can't believe they didn't actually really come from the area I thought they came from originally. So what I mean by that is, like, I found out that my purely maternal line, actually, my second great grandmother, Rachel Skavatsky, as I always thought of her, I always knew that the family was from Kyiv. But oddly enough, there was always stuff in the records, especially censuses and stuff, where she would be listed as from Poland and her husband would be listed as from Russia. But it was like, I didn't know what to expect from that. And then finally, recently, when records came out, actually, I might be able to pull these up. Records came out through digitization efforts in Ukraine, thanks to Alex Krakowski and Family Search and multiple other teams. But basically, we were able to find the marriage record for my second great grandparents. And it gave us the true name of her maiden name, Shvedsky, but even more, it gave her father's name, which was Meyer Shvedsky. And then from there, I was able to actually figure out very easily that the family originally came from Vasilishki. Where is it? I sworn it should be in here. So I'm looking for the. But once I found Shvedsky, then I traced it back to Vasilishki, and that's actually in present day Belarus. It's outside of Grodno. Maybe I should search for Shvedsky instead. That's probably better. And I just realized none of you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just searching on Jewish Gen to find the marriage record. So Ukraine. Is it here? Here we go. So here's my second great grandparents' marriage. So we have Gershko Kazanovich, who then became known as Harris Casino in the U.S., son of Burko. And then we have my second great grandmother, Rochlia Shvedsky, daughter of Meyer. She's 19, and we can actually see an image. So this is the image, and I had help in translating it. Actually, the person who helped me translate it was someone who lives in Ukraine. She used to be in a ton of the live streams. I haven't seen her in a while, so I think it was Sajuka. But yeah, so it's very interesting because it talks about how my second great grandfather, who's listed right here, Gershko Berkovitz, Burkov. Oh, it's just Burkov. Burkovs? I don't know. But Gershko Burkov Kazanovich. So Burko's son of Gershko, son of Burko Kazanovich. And so he's marrying Ruklia Shvedsky, which I think that's right here. Ruklia Meyer Shvedskoy. And so this was what broke it open. And then from there, I was able to find the family in revision lists. I think it's in here. And then take it back because it mentioned that the family was from Vasilishki. Let's see if I can find it. Because they were in Kiev and they were one of the few families in Kiev. So is that them? I don't think so. Can't remember. Looking for Meyer. This was the thing that when I first thought about doing live streams that I was worried about was like when I am trying to do research, like there's definitely a lot of just like kind of just slowly going through it. All right. Now I want to say all right. We're going to go up to Belarus. Actually, I think it's in the Lithuanian ones. We'll do this. Given name Meyer. No, that's not it. That's not it. I think. Okay, here we go. So this is the family. So we have Meyer, son of Elia. And so this is in 1875. And we have son, grandson. Where's my great-grandmother? Her second great-grand. Here we go. Here's my second great-grandmother. Rasia Perka. So Ruchlia Perla is what it should really be. Shvedsky, daughter of Meyer. And so then we see Meyer here, son of Elia. Then we see Elia here. And then we see David, son of Yassel. And Elia is the uncle. So she was born, my second great-grandmother, was born in Vasilishki, but then she ended up going to Kiev. And I think a lot of the family went there as well. So here we have Meyer again. And so notice the dates. We've got the 4th of November, 1874, the 20th of October, 1874. And, basically see the same family. So I was able to actually build out a pretty good family tree of this. And so here we have Elia, son of Meyer. And even better, I had DNA matching as well. So Rasia Perka, my second great-grandmother, one of her siblings, and I think one of the siblings probably was married at this point because I think it was an older, maybe it was younger. I can't remember. But one of the siblings married, I think it was a Wasserstein or something like that. And then I have 8 different DNA matches from that side. So I've been able to prove that with DNA. But that was very surprising to find out that they came from Vasilishki. So let's see. Oh yeah, Bluffstein. That was it. So here, Hanna Shvedska, daughter of Meyer, and then the Vulkensteins. Those are the ones where I have a whole bunch of those. But then my family should be in here. Just need to find Kazanovich. Here we go. So Roslia Kazanovich. So this is my great-grandmother's older sister, Rose, daughter of Gershko, who's the son of Berko, and the daughter of Ruklia Shvedskaya here, who's the daughter of Meyer. And then we can look at that image. So this is 1888 in Kyiv. So here we have the family, is this record right here. So Gershko, Burkov, Kazanovich. And then we have Ruklia, Myrov, something Shvedsky. I'm not sure what that says right there, but yeah. So the family came out to Kyiv from Vasilishki for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why. And then on top of that, Meyer passes away in Kyiv. 7th of October, 1900, 17 years old or 72 years old. Here, his father, Elias, is Yel. And then we've got Meyer there himself. And then, interestingly enough, is like the births of some of these children. I'm not sure if it's really him or maybe some other Meyer. I assume it's probably him. But what's interesting is noting the dates. You know, he's going back and forth between Kyiv and Vasilishki a lot. And actually, let's see if I can do Kyiv to Vasilishki. So Kyiv to Vasilishki, driving is out of the way, but 33 kilometers distance. Oh no, that's Vasil Kyiv. Vasil Kyiv is wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. Don't listen to that. That was wrong. Hold on, I gotta change that. Vasil Kyiv, no Vasilishki. Oh, that's weird. It's like correcting everything to Vasil Kyiv. Vasilishki, Belarus. Let's say that specifically. All right, I don't know. Basically, driving wise, it's 899 kilometers. And I'm sure it'd have to be a similar route when they were going. So, yeah, 12 hours by car. So, very, very interesting. Oh, whoops. Didn't have that up necessarily. But, yeah. So, and then here we have Chaya, wife of Meyer. Oh, wait, no, not wife. Oh, yeah, this is, I think that was right. I think that's the wife. And there's something wrong with this. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff they have to fix, unfortunately, with some of these older ones on here. Some of the entries, it is. But, yeah. All right. So, yeah. Got me on a tangent. Let's see. Where am I? I'm lost. All right. I think it's 5:30. I'm gonna have to jump off here in a second. All right, let me see. I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer this, but let me see, Ron. If I'm on 3 different sites, but going down my tree, I see different names that are on the other sites, that changes the whole trajectory of your DNA. I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, but you're gonna have different DNA matches on the different sites because 1, not everybody is testing on every site. And then 2, depending on how small a match you're getting with some people, the differences in the DNA being tested on each site and the differences of interpretation on each site could cause some matches that show up as very small matches on one site to not show up as a match on the other site, even if they've DNA tested there. So that's not uncommon at all. But yeah, hopefully that helps. All right, I think with that, I'm gonna end it here pretty much. Just to mention again, for anyone that would like to do consultations, I have those available. Just email me at GeneaVlogger@gmail.com. I should hopefully have a website up and running soon. That'll be GeneaVlogger.com. It's coming soon. Of course, streaming live every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And then beyond that, watch my videos, give it a like, give a comment. Interaction really helps me out. And subscribe if you haven't. And yeah, I appreciate everybody supporting me. I appreciate all of you who are, jumping in the stream every week, even if you're catching it late or, can only be here for a minute. Always great to have you. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Hopefully you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday and rest of your weekend. And I'll see you next week. I'm Jarrett Ross, the GeneaVlogger, and I'm out. I'll see you next week. Bye.